From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. Hey, James, I'm glad we're back. Had a couple of episodes without you and missed you a bit, but we're back in the saddle and have a fun topic today.
Yeah, I was so jealous that you were on site at ISE that this one I had to be a remote site. I'm at work, but I just had to do it. You guys did an amazing job at ISE, and I'm glad you got out there and represented us.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry you weren't, and I hope that we can do this in the future. For those who didn't listen back at Infocom, James and I were out together on site, and it was great not only to be in person, but to be able to see some of our listeners, be able to interact with people on a face-to-face level, and just hear how much our podcast has impacted our audience in the industry. And it's just, frankly, we're both a little flattered by the feedback that we've been getting, and it's really great. So please keep it coming. What we wanted to talk about today is something that I think is timely. We're kind of on the tail end now of the pandemic, and still a lot of manufacturers and clients are facing changes due to supply chain, and not just the delays that supply chain causes, but maybe changes in strategy, changes in product lines, changes in the thought process about how we go to designing systems, selecting equipment, making choices, and also programming, of course, comes into play there. And we've talked a bit about standardization, and talked a bit about trying to look at approved equipment. I know that's something that HETMA is into. So James, you're more hands-on, more in the trenches with stuff like this. What does this recent shift, and what have we learned, and do we think that what we've learned is something that's going to be lasting about how to deal with products that may or may not be always available?
So, a couple questions within that one question. Let's try to break it down. Do I think that we learned something from this? I want to say yes, but I fear no. I've heard many folks say, well, I'm just going to sit and wait it out. And that is alarming to me, because as I've actually had this conversation with many manufacturers. In fact, I had this conversation with one not too long ago, and they all kind of look at me funny when I say this, is I do not have brand loyalty. I have a loyalty to my students and my university. Yes, if your product is meeting those needs, and my education is getting done for my students and my university, and you're a good partner, great. But when you're not a good partner and you are not meeting that need, I have no hesitation moving to someone else who will meet those needs. And like I said, every time I tell a manufacturer that, I get the cross eyes, like, we don't like that answer. And as I look at it, I'm not here to make friends with manufacturers. I love our manufacturers. Don't get me wrong. I do love manufacturers. But again, my loyalty is to my students and the university. And that's just like a manufacturer is going to be loyal to their product, or any business is going to be should be loyal to their clients or their end users. So that's the way it should be. And it keeps them on their toes, I think. But it does throw up alarms when I hear people who are like, I'm going to ride or die with this partner. And I feel that it could, hurt things and actually lead to downward trends when they do that. So that's a fear of mine. Like I said, I'm not like that, but I've heard through not just some higher ed, but also integrators and other people talk like, oh, we'll just wait out the storm. See how that plays out for them. I hope it does. Um, but I think as a programmer, we can't have brand loyalty because we never know what's coming across our desk. It could be brand X, it could be brand Y, it could be brand Z. So we need to be able to work with any brand. We should be brand agnostic.
And I think that there's a couple of different ways to look at that too. And I would agree with you because, just like for me and my company, I like to live by the adage that, success is rented and not owned, and the rent is due every day. You have to earn it, and you have to be something, you have to make sure that you're taking care of your client and you're there for them. On the flip side, sometimes making changes in standards and having to work with a new product not only causes short term but could also cause long term impact. I remember a conversation actually that I had on the State of Control podcast with Scott Tyner, where he was saying that when you make a change on a product, you have to live with that product for quite some time. And so you have to be very careful when you're going to make a change, and trying something new could have a lasting impact. um, Looking at it from a programming perspective, one of the arguments that we hear a lot about is that it's hard to learn a new language, or it's hard to learn a new platform, or I don't want to have to go back to square one where I know all the tips and tricks with this programming, and now I have to start over to learn another type of programming. What are your thoughts on that? Because I think from our perspective, as programmers, and hopefully our listeners can feel the same way, that could be kind of challenging when, well, I think it's good to be able to stay open to new products. Having to learn things and not be able to apply them can sometimes be very distracting for programmers.
Yeah, so I actually want to take two stabs at this. I want to take first a stab at what you were mentioning with Scott Tyner. And Scott Tyner is a brilliant guy, a good colleague. I think he very wise. But my thing is, as a programmer, I'm looking at this as a programmer eyes, is the equipment under the hood shouldn't matter. If you can program it and designed it that the experience is the same. And I'll go back to another colleague of ours, I'm sure you know of him, Steve, is Bill O'Donnell. And he was saying, let's take an automobile, for example. The key ignition is same spot in every vehicle, or should be. Doesn't matter if it's a Ford, doesn't matter if it's Chevy, it doesn't matter if it's Toyota, whoever, they're all basically in the same location. And when it's not in that location, you, as a user, you're trying to find that, and that's a bad experience. And he has talked about a experience he had with a rental car, and he said it's not a good experience. Like, he remembers it, but not for a good reason. If we as programmers are doing our job and designing our UI so that there's the same consistent feel to it, it shouldn't matter that if under the hood it's a Crestron, Extron, Kramer, Lightwear, AMX, Z, Y, whatever. The experience to our users should be the same. Now, it may mean more work on us as programmers. And I go back to that whole notion I said a couple of times is, if mountains were smooth, we wouldn't be able to climb them. We are going to face challenges. I actually wrote kind of a more personal article, the higher ed one, recently. Of life is going to try. I even said life is going to try to break you. We need to overcome that battle with what we're facing, and we can't be like, oh no, I can't go learn Python. I'm a C# programmer. I can't learn Python, even though Python might be the right answer for my users. Then you're not doing a service to your users. I feel. You're limiting yourself, and I almost go back to the whole COBOL programmers and people who were dead set on COBOL. Well, COBOL's a dead language now. If that's the only thing you knew, you have no job. So,
Interesting way of looking at it, because it also brings up the idea of how can you learn different languages or programming that is transferable. So if you can learn to write, because what I've heard, and I know that it's not perfect, but what I've heard is that if you can write object-oriented programming that is translatable to different languages, and a lot of times that will help you to create consistency. However, I know that that's not the world that we live in all the time in control programming, but perhaps this is a reason for us to head in that direction.
oh, I definitely agreed. Having an insane language like that, I I'll admit my data sample is very limited, so I will be speaking from my experience here, but I think my knowledge of programming traditional IT platforms of like C sharp, I teaching myself Python and PHP, like having that kind of knowledge allowed me to really pick up a match coding, because that's what I used to do. Now I'm in a spot that we're a crush on. I have not done any crush on programming yet, but I'm not going to sit here and go, well, I'm not going to learn it. I'm going to take on that challenge. I'm going to learn what it takes to program that equipment, and then I'm expanding my data set, and then it'd be like, well, maybe Creshon's not the best, or maybe AMX is not the best, or maybe C sharp's not the best. Whatever, like you learn how to grow, and yeah, you're going to tend to lean on what you know, but like what's that saying is, when you speak, you can only speak what you know, but when you listen, you learn new things.
Mhm.
And that's kind of how, like, yeah, if you work only with one language because you know it, then you're not expanding your knowledge.
So and I'm one of the things that I believe in, that I do in my company, is we really pride ourselves in being able to support multiple platforms, because we have to be able to field what clients are asking for. And I mean, to your point, you need to keep your options open, because you don't know what is going to be in demand or what clients are going to need from you. So I mean, that's something that can agree with more. um, I think the question that might come up from others is, what are some things that we could do to help include considerations for programming in more standards and more ways of picking equipment that is going to be substitutable. So if you can't get your top choice, how do you look at how do you evaluate the others to know that they're going to be able to work? Obviously, from an AV perspective, they are looked at, but oftentimes they're not looked at from a control or a programming perspective.
Yeah, that's a good point. No one ever thinks about the code and programming side, because as they look at it, it's just a few lines of code, doesn't mean anything.
Exactly.
But I think having shows like this, like, and shows like State of Control, and having people who speak up and saying, we need, this is not right, we need to build a standard and make true interoperability, is what we need. We need to develop that true interoperability, saying, all right, we're going to grow as a industry and be able to use different platforms and different devices to achieve the same goal. Um, Again, we sit here and talk about AV as an art and a user experience, but then we try to build everything into an ecosystem and lock our users into this ecosystem. If we're truly in art and truly about the user experience, I mean, artists are not confined by their canvas. They go out and explore. They might be watercolors or oils or metal, and they can integrate all this stuff together, or even light and objects. And like I said, they expand their horizon. They're not limited of what they can do. And if AV really wants to be that true art form, from hardware all the way down to the programming, we need to break out of the box and be true interoperability.
Which I love that topic, because that's something that came up quite a bit at ISE. And if you listen to our recent episodes where we talk, I had the opportunity to talk with the folks at QSYS. I think that that's something that's becoming more and more to the forefront, and it's really a great thing. And I think that's been a significant change over the past few years, where there's a change and a turn from it has to be the same brand A to Z for all the components, versus going back to true integration, which is what I started, and the way really why control systems existed. You take a bunch of equipment that don't work together natively and make them work. Now, nobody wants to go back to that, but I think that there needs to be some type of a blend where more products can work together natively, but they don't have to be the same brand. They could be substitutable. And that's, of course, some type of communication standards. But then how do we make them easy to work when they are different? And for me, I turn to looking at having an API, but not only having that, having some type of a module or driver or plugin that allows a programmer or an integrator to say, I know that this works with my platform of choice.
Yep.
And that's one way of accomplishing that. It's not the only way, but that's one way of doing that. And I think that we're finding more visibility being put on that. And that's maybe one of the positive outcomes of the supply chain challenges that we've faced, at least from a programming standpoint. There's more eyes on the need to consider control.
Yeah, no, I think you very valid there, and I do see the trend coming, and that's like I see with the HEPMA approved program is HEPMA is not sitting there going, well, we're going to force all approval for this product. We're looking at it as a more true interoperability to allow education to happen, with saying, yes, these products have been vetted and that they should work in a education environment.
Mm-hmm. As we sign off, please share how people can learn more about that, because I really like that concept, and I think HEPMA is doing a really good thing to improve and raise the bar in the industry with that. And I think more considerations have to be made, not to look at a product from all the different perspectives, and in and manufacturers, I think some of them need to be enlightened as to what they can do to be able to bring their product to market in a way that is that it can be competitive and be compatible and comparable to its competitors. And of course, you want to have your competitive advantage, but you also want to be able to not be excluded from projects because you're not able to meet certain requirements.
No, I agree. And Donovan Monday has done an amazing job with the HEPMA Pro program. And actually, I'm saying this out loud now. Maybe one of these days we'll get Donovan on here and have him talk about it. So Donovan, you're listening. Let's try to get you on here.
I like it. I like it. Well, it's probably a good place for us to wrap this one. James, I know you have a lot going on and a lot of cool things that are brewing for you. How can people get in touch with you and learn what you're up to?
Oh, thank you. See, the easiest way to get a hold of me is on Twitter, AV_James Fing. I'm on LinkedIn, getting a little more active there now. I will be at Infocom this year, so if you're at Infocom, don't hesitate to grab me and talk to me. I love when our fans come up and say they like the show, because I'm so amazed. I'm floored. Last two Infocoms, we had people come up to us, so I'm hoping to continue that trend. So if you're at Infocom, definitely look me up.
Absolutely. Yeah. Keep an eye on James' Twitter. He's got a lot of things that he's been sharing and announcing. So if you want to know what those are, check him out and make sure you send him a message and let him know that you're listening. For me, you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media. I do some writing for my company blog at controlconcepts.net and do the State of Control podcast on avnation.tv, as I mentioned, and contribute to several publications in the industry. So please check those out. But what's important to us is that you listen to our show and let us know that you're out there and help us to help make this as valuable as possible for you. You could watch us on YouTube. You could subscribe on Apple and Google Podcasts, and you can reach out to us. We're always looking to have a conversation. And as you've heard on recent episodes, we are looking to profile some of our listeners. So please let us know if you're interested in that. And you always reach out with your questions, because that's what we're looking to do and why we're here. And this has been Ask the Programmer.